Welcome back, dear friends, to another exciting episode of the Dispensation of Baha'u'llah. We are on part 20, covering paragraphs 83 through 90. And without any further ado, dear friends, we'll have our opening prayer. Thank you so much.
O thou who art the Lord of Lords, I testify that thou art the Lord of all creation and the educator of all beings, visible and invisible. I bear witness that thy power hath encompassed the entire universe, and that the hosts of the earth can never dismay thee, nor can the dominion of all peoples and nations deter thee from executing thy purpose. I confess that thou hast no desire except the regeneration of the whole world, and the establishment of the unity of its peoples, and the salvation of all them that dwell therein. Baha'u'llah.
Beautiful, Miss Claudia. Thank you so much. And welcome to every one of you. So good to see you. And we're going to jump back into our study. So dear friends, if you're joining us for the first time, which none of you are, but I'm talking to all the dear friends on YouTube and across the world. If you're joining us for the first time, you're like, Ehsan, what are you studying? We're studying the World Order of Baha'u'llah. And this is one of the letters in the World Order of Baha'u'llah entitled The Dispensation of Baha'u'llah. And if you're joining us for the first time, shame on you. Go back and watch all the videos. So there you go. So find the World Order of Baha'u'llah and start reading. That's your homework. What are you doing? Right now, I'm joking. This is such a privilege, dear friends, to have these texts. We're picking up on paragraph 83. And if you're like, where is paragraph 83? It's on page 136, at least in my World Order of Baha'u'llah. You guys might have a different edition and all of that, but it's at the page 136. Oh, there you go. Wow, Miss Claudia, you got an ancient edition, right?
Yeah.
Right? But
Yes.
It's still held together. Oh, Miss Mary, wonderful. So let's share my screen so we're all, as they say, on the same page. Here we go. Okay. Now we're going. So tonight we're going to go through paragraphs 83 through 90. And this is still in the section entitled Abdu'l-Bahá. And so far, we have already gone through the section entitled Baha'u'llah, as well as the section entitled The Bab. Now we're continuing going through this section entitled Abdu'l-Bahá, okay? And in this section, we've been learning about the misconceptions in regards to that the Westerners as well as the Easterners had to the stationhood of Abdu'l-Bahá. And so now we're going to address some of these misunderstandings. Where did they come from? So this is an interesting section, right? As well as irrational and superstitious beliefs. And we'll also be talking about these three central figures, His Holiness Baha'u'llah, the Bab, as well as Abdu'l-Bahá. Okay, and so I'm not going to read any of these sections to preserve my voice. So dear friends, help me out. I'm going to call on you. So let's get this show on the road, as they say. So our first reader will be our dear Miss Mary. If you could kindly read paragraph 83.
Okay. Exalted as is the rank of Abdu'l-Bahá, and however profuse the praises with which in these sacred books and tablets Baha'u'llah has glorified his son, so unique a distinction must never be construed as conferring upon its recipient a station identical with or equivalent to that of his father, the manifestation himself. To give such an interpretation to any of these quoted passages would at once and for obvious reasons bring it into conflict with the no less clear and authentic assertions and warnings to which I have already referred. Indeed, as I have already stated, those who overestimate Abdu'l-Bahā's station are just as reprehensible and have done just as much harm as those who underestimate it. And this for no other reason except that by insisting upon an altogether unwarranted inference from Baha'u'llah's writings, they are inadvertently justifying and continuously furnishing the enemy with proofs for his false accusations and misleading statements.
Beautifully read, Miss Mary. Thank you so much. Okay, and moving to paragraph 84. Okay, our next reader. Our dear Zamruhi John, if you could please read for us. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. I feel it necessary, therefore, to state without any equivocation or hesitation that neither in the Kitab-i Aqdas, nor in the Book of Baha'u'llah's Covenant, nor even in the Tablet of the Branch, nor in any other tablet, whether revealed by Baha'u'llah or Abdu'l-Bahá, is there any authority whatever for the opinion that inclines to uphold the so-called mystic unity of Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Bahá, or to establish the identity of the latter with his father or with any preceding manifestation. This erroneous conception may, in part, be ascribed to an altogether extravagant interpretation of certain terms and passages in the Tablet of the Branch, to the introduction into its English translation of certain words that are either non-existent, misleading, or ambiguous in their connotation. It is no doubt chiefly based upon an altogether unjustified inference from the opening passage of a tablet of Baha'u'llah, extracts of which, as reproduced in the Baha'i scriptures, immediately precede but form no part of the said tablet of the branch. It should be made clear to everyone reading those extracts that by the phrase, the tongue of the ancient, no one else is meant but God, and that the term, the greatest name, is an obvious reference to Baha'u'llah, and that the covenant referred to is not the specific covenant of which Baha'u'llah is the immediate author and Abdu'l-Bahá the center, but that general covenant which, as inculcated by the Baha'i teaching, God himself invariably establisheth with mankind when he inaugurates a new dispensation. The tongue that gives, as stated in those extracts, the glad tidings is none other than the voice of God, referring to Baha'u'llah, and not Baha'u'llah referring to Abdu'l-Bahá. You're on mute.
Sorry, I coughed. Okay, thank you, dear Zamruhi. Let's go to Miss Yuda. Thank you so much.
Moreover, to maintain that the assertion, he is myself, instead of denoting the mystic unity of God and his manifestations, as explained in the Kitab-i-Ikan, establishes the identity of Baha'u'llah with Abdu'l-Bahá, would constitute a direct violation of the oft-repeated principle of the oneness of God's manifestations, a principle which the author of these same extracts is seeking by implication to emphasize.
Excellently read, Ms. Yuda. Thank you so much. And going to paragraph 86, a nice short one. Riaz John, if you could read this one. Thank you.
It would, it would also amount to a reversion to those irrational and superstitious beliefs which have insensibly crept in the first century of the Christian era into the teachings of Jesus Christ, and by crystallizing into accepted dogmas, have impaired the effectiveness and obscured the purpose of the Christian faith.
Very well read. Thank you so much. All right. Now we move to paragraph 87. Dear Doug, could you read this one for us?
I affirm is Abdu'l-Bahā's own written comment on the tablet of the branch, that the true meaning, the real significance, the innermost secret of these verses, of these very words, is my own servitude to the sacred threshold of the Abha beauty, my complete self-effacement, my utter nothingness before him. This is my resplendent crown, my most precious adorning. On this I pride myself in the kingdom of earth and heaven. Therein I glory among the company of the well-favored. No one is permitted, he warns us in the passage which immediately follows, to give these verses any other interpretation. I am, he in this same connection affirms. According to the explicit texts of the Kitab-i-Aqdas and the Kitab-i-Ad, the manifest interpreter of the Word of God, whoso deviates from my interpretation is a victim of his own fancy.
Beautifully read, Doug. Thank you. Thank you. And moving to 88. Dear Marianne, if you could kindly read this one for us.
Yes. Furthermore, the inescapable inference from the belief in the identity of the author of our faith with him who is the center of his covenant would be to place Abdu'l-Bahá in a position superior to that of the Bab, the reverse of which is the fundamental, though not as yet universally recognized, principle of this revelation. It would also justify the charge with which all throughout Abdu'l-Bahā's ministry, the covenant breakers have striven to poison the minds and pervert the understanding of Baha'u'llah's loyal followers. May I ask a question?
Please, dear Miss Marianne.
In the previous part, it mentions these things that have crept into Christianity. What exactly were they? Yeah,
this one.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. So there is a slide on it, Miss Marianne, so we're going to get to there. You're asking a great question, okay? So we'll get to that, okay?
Okay.
Thank you so much. You can always ask, but whether I answer it now or later, that is my call, but we'll get to it, okay?
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Okay, moving on. Paragraph 89. Okay, let us have, okay, let me see. Farzad John, you haven't read yet. Please read, thank you.
It would be more correct and in consonance with the established principles of Baha'u'llah and the Bab if, instead of maintaining this fictitious identity with reference to Abdu'l-Bahá, we regard the forerunner and the founder of our faith as identical in reality, a truth which the text of the Surah Al-Haykal unmistakably affirms. At the primal point, the Bab, been someone else beside me, as ye claim, is Baha'u'llah's explicit statement, and had attained my presence. Verily, he would have never allowed himself to be separated from me, but rather we would have mutual delights with each other in my days. He who now voiced the word of God, Baha'u'llah again affirms, is none other except the primal point, who had once again been made manifest. He thus refers to himself in a tablet addressed to one of the letters of the living, the same as the one who appeared in the year 1260 AH. This verily is one of his mighty signs, who he pleads in the Surah Al-Dam will arise to secure the triumph of the primal point, primal beauty, the Bab, revealed in the countenance of his succeeding manifestation, referring to the revelation proclaimed by the Bab. He conversely characterizes it as my own previous manifestation.
Very well read, Farzad Jan. Very, very well read. Thank you so much. And last paragraph 90. I'll read this one for you guys. Okay. Here we go. That Abdu'l-Bahá is not a manifestation of God, that he gets his light, his inspiration, and sustenance direct from the fountainhead of the Baha'i revelation, that he reflects even as a clear and perfect mirror the rays of Baha'u'llah's glory, and does not inherently possess that indefinable yet all-pervading reality, the exclusive possession of which is the hallmark of prophethood, that his words are not equal in rank, though they possess an equal validity with the utterances of Baha'u'llah, that he is not to be acclaimed as the return of Jesus Christ, the Son, who will come in the glory of the Father. These truths find added justification and are further reinforced by the following statement of Abdu'l-Bahá, addressed to some believers in America, with which I may well conclude this section. You have written that there is a difference among the believers concerning the second coming of Christ. Gracious God, time and again, this question hath arisen, and its answer hath emanated in a clear and irrefutable statement from the pen of Abdu'l-Bahá, that what is meant in the prophecies by the Lord of hosts and the promised Christ is the blessed perfection, Baha'u'llah, and His Holiness the Exalted One, the Bab. My name is Abdu'l-Bahá. My qualification is Abdu'l-Bahá. My reality is Abdu'l-Bahá. My praise is Abdu'l-Bahá. Thraldom to the blessed perfection is my glorious and refulgent diadem, and servitude to all the human race, my perpetual religion. No name, no title, no mention, no commendation have I, nor will ever have, except Abdu'l-Bahá. This is my longing, this is my greatest yearning, this is my eternal life, this is my everlasting glory. And there we are, dear friends, paragraphs 83 through 90, concluding the section on Abdu'l-Bahá. So how wonderful, how absolutely clear language, crystal clear language, the beloved guardian is setting out who Abdu'l-Bahá is in this section, and really stating in such clear language that Abdu'l-Bahā's station is not on the same station as a manifestation of God. He is also not on the same station as humanity. He is on a different station. And there was a very interesting paragraph. Let me find it for you, where it states that as humanity, we should be very watchful and careful not to, let me make sure. I have to do a quick scan, make sure I don't jump it. That we shouldn't overstate the station of Abdu'l-Bahá and not understate the station of Abdu'l-Bahá. Okay, it was I think it was Abdu'l-Bahá to this is my reading problem. I think it was before this. Okay. Oh. Yeah. Okay. So that was a very interesting paragraph for me also, because we recall this is what one of the these are what the covenant breakers did. And they clung on to that, oh, the Baha'is think he is of such an exalted station, that he is of equal or higher rank to manifestations of God. And obviously we cannot understate the station of Abdu'l-Bahá. So we have to study the life. Remember my days during thy days. This does not always just pertain to His Holiness Baha'u'llah, right? Talking about the Holy Family. Remember, follow the example. Look at me, follow me, be as I am. Look to the example of who Abdu'l-Bahá is. So these are things that, dear friends, as we look to his example, we can bring that example closer and closer and into our own reality and meditate on that. So, dear friends, there's so many wonderful questions as you were reading this. And one of them was already stated about talking about Christianity and how they went through misinterpretations. We're going to talk about all of these as we go through. So in this section of this letter, this is the last part of paragraphs 83 through 90 of this in this section of Abdu'l-Bahá. The beloved guardian is identifying now some of the sources of misunderstanding. If you miss the source, you're probably not the only one, because the source was mentioned in the paragraph, and the source was called Baha'i Scriptures. Baha'i Scriptures is now out of print. It's not, and I'll show you the actual text. It's out of print, and there's a good reason why it's out of print. It's because the translations, even mentioned here in Dispensation of Baha'u'llah, states that the translations are not good. And even the beloved guardian, the infallible interpreter, the sign of God on earth, actually is stating the translation is not good, and actually per se correcting who is the station of Abdu'l-Bahá in this section. So that is one of the areas that the Western friends were reading, was this text called Baha'i Scriptures. So they were getting an incorrect understanding of the station of Abdu'l-Bahá. And I'm going to show you that, and show you the paragraph in Baha'i Scriptures, and show you the all of that as it was mentioned as it's mentioned in Dispensation of Baha'u'llah. So that is one of the areas of misunderstanding in regards to the station of Abdu'l-Bahá. The beloved guardian is also emphasizing that those who overestimate the station of Abdu'l-Bahá, they're also reprehensible as those who underestimate it. He also warns us that such misinterpretations can cause irrational and superstitious beliefs to creep into the teachings of the Baha'i faith, as happened in the first century of Christianity. So these are, we'll get to this area, and this is very interesting as what happened in the first century of Christianity, as well as these irrational and superstitious beliefs. All right. Dear Zamrujan, if you could go through some of these major key points for us.
The Dispensation of Baha'u'llah, major key points from paragraphs 83 to 90. There is no evidence in the Baha'i writings to equate the station of Abdu'l-Bahá with Baha'u'llah or any preceding manifestation. Soon after the ascension of Baha'u'llah, some believers made an attempt to elevate the station of Abdu'l-Bahá to that of Baha'u'llah based on their personal interpretation of the contents of the tablet of the branch. The exaggerated interpretation of the terms and title used
in
in the tablet of the branch, the Surah Qusn, was one of the sources of misunderstanding.
Excellent. Thank you, Zamrujan. Carry on. You have a wonderful voice, please.
The introduction into its English translation of the tablet of the branch, certain words that are either non-existent, misleading, or ambiguous in their connotation was our source. The station of the Bab is superior to Abdu'l-Bahá, not vice versa. Baha'u'llah and the Bab are one in their realities.
Excellent. So these are the major key points in these paragraphs that we read. Okay, and some of these are misunderstandings that some of the friends, in the West thought Abdu'l-Bahā's station was higher than the Blessed Bab because there's not much written about the Blessed Bab, right? So then we hear the friends in the West saw Abdu'l-Bahá, they have his writings, and so they thought, Abdu'l-Bahá must be of a higher station. He is the son of Baha'u'llah, so he must be of a higher station than the Blessed Bab. So this was also another misunderstanding. That's also the beloved guardian here in Dispensation of Baha'u'llah, pouring forth the fundamental verities of the Baha'i faith, wanted to first and clearly correct that the station of Abdu'l-Bahá and the station of Baha'u'llah, as well as the station of the Blessed Bab. Okay, so he is here correcting all of these and also pointing out, per se, where errors have emerged in the understandings. Okay, so we go to paragraph 83. The beloved guardian states that those who overestimate the station of Abdu'l-Bahá are as reprehensible as those who underestimate it. This statement is a reference to the confusion that existed at the time of the beloved guardian about the station of Abdu'l-Bahá. Soon after the ascension of Baha'u'llah, there were differences of opinion among the believers regarding the station of Abdu'l-Bahá. And based on personal interpretation of the contents of the tablet of the branch, some believers made an attempt to elevate the station of Abdu'l-Bahá to that of Baha'u'llah. So this happened. This is part of Baha'i history. Some of the believers thought that he was of the same station as that of Baha'u'llah. In paragraph 84, the beloved guardian explicitly rejects the possibility that the station of Abdu'l-Bahá is equal to that of Baha'u'llah. This is not the first time. I don't know. This is at least the fourth or fifth time that this statement has come, explicitly rejecting the statement that Abdu'l-Bahá is on the same station as a manifestation of God. He states that neither in the Kitab Aqdas, nor in the book of Baha'u'llah's covenant, nor even in the tablet of the branch, nor in any other tablet, whether revealed by Baha'u'llah or Abdu'l-Bahá, is there any authority whatever for the opinion that inclines to uphold the so-called mystic unity of Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Bahá. So I love the language of the beloved guard, truly. I mean, look at how he goes and how he writes here. He says, he states that neither in the most holy book, nor in Baha'u'llah's covenant, nor in any tablet of the branch or any other tablet, He says in any writing, pretty much period, there's nowhere can you find any proof that there is any relation of this mystic unity of Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Bahá. That means they do not abide on the same station. Mystic unity. They are not on the same plane. So this is absolute rejecting of that per se idea that the friends were coming up with. We move on, and on the contrary, Abdu'l-Bahá in many of his tablets has clarified his own position as this lowly servant of Baha'u'llah. Although he was appointed by Baha'u'llah as the center of his covenant and the interpreter of his words. If you ever want to know who Abdu'l-Bahá is, the last few lines of this section of Abdu'l-Bahá, my name is Abdu'l-Bahá, my title is Abdul. That is who Abdu'l-Bahá is. Thraldom, every molecule of Abdu'l-Bahá is dedicated to service. Every atom is. So this is our perfect exemplar. And remember, he was a human. He occupied human reality, He was a physical person. But there was so much more to who he is, and we've been learning about that, right? He was a gift. He was a creation of Baha'u'llah. He is the incarnation of every Baha'i ideal. So this is an incredible extract that I've pulled, and this we read also comes from Revelation of Baha'u'llah. Soon after the ascension of Baha'u'llah, there were differences among the believers concerning the station of Abdu'l-Bahá. Some regarded him as having the same identity as Baha'u'llah. We talked about that. A belief which runs counter to the basic verities enshrined within the faith. And in several tablets, Abdu'l-Bahá clarified his own position. He explained that although he was the center of the covenant of Baha'u'llah, as well as the interpreter of his words, he was nevertheless a lowly servant at the threshold of Baha'u'llah. And in one of his tablets, Abdu'l-Bahá writes, "This is my firm, my unshakable conviction, the essence of my unconcealed and explicit belief, a conviction and belief which the denizens of the Abha kingdom fully share. The blessed beauty is the Son of Truth, and his light, the light of truth. The Bab is likewise the Son of Truth, and his light, the light of truth. My station is the station of servitude, a servitude which is complete, pure, and real, firmly established, enduring, obvious, explicitly revealed, and subject to no interpretation whatever. I am the interpreter of the word of God. Such is my interpretation." Honestly, I'm not a very smart person, but when I read these writings, I see it as crystal clear. I don't know how the friends in the West misunderstood these words. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's very clear. The blessed beauty is the Son of Truth. That's Baha'u'llah. And here, the Bab is likewise the Son of Truth. Then he says, my station is the station of servitude. So he doesn't have the same station as the Bab and Baha'u'llah. I don't understand how the friends in the West misunderstood these facts. Maybe it is because they were too close in the early days to Abdu'l-Bahá in a sense. That's why, and so they thought that maybe this personage occupies such a station. And so, but if they turn to his writings, it is explicitly clear. If they read what his words stated, it says very clearly that he does not occupy the same station as Baha'u'llah, does not occupy the same station as the Blessed Bab. So this is where we are gifted. In the early days, they didn't have access to writings like we do now. They just had the early days, the presence of Abdu'l-Bahá, as well as a handful of writings, as well as so-called people interpreting writings back in the days. And so that was an issue and challenge. The beloved guardian identifies two factors. This is interesting. Two factors contributing to such a misunderstanding. The first was the exaggerated interpretation of the terms and titles used in the tablet of the branch, the Surah Qusna, by some Baha'is. Baha'u'llah revealed this tablet in Arabic during his exile in Adrianople. The tablet is addressed to Mirza Rezai Mustafi, a believer from Khorasan. The main theme of this tablet is the nature of the station of Abdu'l-Bahá. And here on the right, this is the Surah Qusna. It's illuminated. It's, a picture of it. So moving on. The other factor was the introduction into its English, the translation of the tablet of the branch. Certain words that were either non-existent, misleading in their connotation. So now is the translation part that was causing the confusion. The beloved guardian also states that such interpretations were mainly the result of erroneous conclusions drawn from the opening passages of a tablet of Baha'u'llah, the extracts of which had been published before the tablet of the branch in a compilation called Baha'i Scriptures. So on the right, you could see, this is not the actual cover of the book, but this is Baha'i Scriptures, selections from the Utterances of Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Bahá. It was edited by Horace Hawley, and it was copyrighted in 1923. And so this was an old text and had very, very early translations in it. It is obviously out of print right now, and this was one of the sources of misunderstanding. So looking to this Baha'i Scriptures, this is what happened. The extracts referred to by the beloved guardian here in the Dispensation of Baha'u'llah, the source of confusion is right here. Verily, the tongue of the ancient gives glad tidings to those who are in the world concerning the appearance of the greatest name, and who takes his covenant among the nations. Verily, he is myself, the shining place of my identity, the east of my cause, the heaven of my bounty, the sea of my will, the lamp of my guidance, the path of my justice, the standard of my love. In the early prints of Baha'i Scriptures, the asterisk on page 255 was footnoted right here. Verily, he is myself, was footnoted as Abdu'l-Bahá. Later was changed to Baha'u'llah. The beloved guardian emphasizes that such an interpretation was wrong. Okay, so this is the paragraphs on here that was the beloved guardian is addressing here in Dispensation of Baha'u'llah. The beloved guardian provides the authoritative explanation of the true meaning of these terms used in this tablet of Baha'u'llah in the paragraphs 84 through 86. So the term, the tongue of the ancient, this right here. Verily, the tongue of the ancient gives glad tidings. Who is that? It's a reference to God, okay? Oh, my chubby finger. The term the greatest name is a reference to Baha'u'llah. The term the covenant means the covenant that God makes with mankind at the end of a new dispensation. The glad tidings are the voice of God, referring to Baha'u'llah, not Baha'u'llah referring to Abdu'l-Bahá. So it's God referring to Baha'u'llah, not Baha'u'llah referring to Abdu'l-Bahá. That's a very important distinction. And then the station He is myself refers to the mystic unity of God and Baha'u'llah, and not Baha'u'llah and Abdul-Bahá. So let's look to the quotes so you can see these in the text. So the term the greatest name is a reference to Baha'u'llah. Let's look to this. Okay, where does it say the greatest name? Very tongue. Verily, the tongue of the ancient, this is a reference to God, gives glad tidings. Gives glad tidings. What is the glad? Gives glad tidings. The glad tidings are the voice of God, referring to Baha'u'llah. So God is giving these glad tidings, announcing Baha'u'llah hath come, right? Announcing to the world concerning the appearance of the greatest name. Who is the greatest name? Baha'u'llah, right? And who takes his covenant among the nations. And taking his covenant means the covenant that God makes with mankind at the end of a new dispensation. So now God is announcing Baha'u'llah hath come, and his appearance is come, and God is now announcing his covenant. Now, in the second paragraph, here, isn't it awesome that we have the Guardian that, very clearly interpreting every part of this. So there's no misunderstanding. So this is what he's done. He says, verily he is myself, the shining place of my identity. So what is this about? Last is here. Verily, the station he is myself refers to the mystic unity of God and Baha'u'llah. Oh, verily he is myself. Oh, yeah, right here. The mystic unity of God and Baha'u'llah, the shining place of my identity, the east of my cause, the heaven of my bounty, the sea of my will. So this is now the mystic unity of Baha'u'llah and God. All right, so that was the beloved Guardian wanted to clarify this, per se, this reference that is quoted in Baha'i scriptures that was a source of misunderstanding, because the friends translated the mystic unity to instead of between God and Baha'u'llah, it was between Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Bahá, thinking that Abdu'l-Bahá is on the same station as Baha'u'llah. There are similar passages in the Kitab-i-Quran in which Baha'u'llah makes such a claim of mystic unity between God and himself. And here are some examples, okay? These are from the Kitab-i-Quran. Were any of old embracing manifestations of God to declare, I am God, he verily speaketh the truth, and no doubt attacheth thereto. For it hath been repeatedly demonstrated that through their revelation, their attributes and names, the revelation of God, his name and his attributes are made manifest in the world. And here again, even as he hath said, there is no distinction whatsoever between thee and them, that they are thy servants and are created of thee. This is the significance of the tradition, I am he, himself, and he is I, myself. It's the mystic unity of they are one, it's the oneness of. So this is a very interesting, the mystic unity of between the manifestation of God and God. They are the perfect reflection of their Lord. So this is references in Kitab-i-Quran. All right. And on this subject, I'm going to get someone to read this one. Farzad John, you have if you could kindly read this one.
Sources of misunderstanding. At some stage, Haji Mirza Haydar Ali, one of the prominent early Baha'is, living at the time of both Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Bahá, wrote a letter to Abdu'l-Bahá and asked him to explain the significance of Baha'u'llah's utterances in the Surah Qos and other tablets, including certain verses in the Masnavi concerning the exalted station of the branch. In reply, Abdu'l-Bahá wrote a tablet in which he announced most eloquently his station of servitude and besought the Almighty to immerse him in the ocean of servitude. He then made the following statement: I am, according to the explicit text of the Kitab Aqdas and the Kitab Ahdi, the manifest interpreter of the word of God. Whoso deviates from my interpretation is a victim of his own fancy. I affirm that the true meaning, the real significance, the innermost secret of these verses, of these very words, is my own servitude to the sacred threshold of the abhor beauty, my complete self-effacement, my utter nothingness before him. This is my resplendent crown, my most precious adorning. On this I pride myself in the kingdom of earth and heaven. Therein I glory among the company of the well-favored.
Excellent. Thank you, Farzad John. So here, this is His Holiness Abdu'l-Bahá is writing. He wrote a tablet in which he announced so clearly, so eloquently, his station of servitude, right? Because why is he doing this? Because the friends are misinterpreting, they're misunderstanding the stationhood of Abdu'l-Bahá. And this was one, as mentioned, if we scroll back, was one of the factors right here. They were exaggerating the interpretation of the terms and titles used in the Surah Qosna. And the Surah Qosna was this tablet that was revealed by Baha'u'llah, in which Baha'u'llah was glorifying his son, right? He's glorifying so lovingly, and the stationhood of his son. And so they were thinking that he was of even higher station than, so they were exaggerating his stationhood. So here, Abdu'l-Bahá, in very explicit language. Riyaz John, you have a hand, please.
Thank you so much. In the second paragraph of the slide, we read, I am according to the explicit text of the Kitab Aqdas and the Kitab Ahd, the manifest interpreter of the word of God. Whoso deviates from my interpretation is a victim of his own fancy. I just wanted to point out to us, ourselves, everyone, myself included, that even though Abdu'l-Bahá asserts his absolute servitude to the threshold of Baha'u'llah, yet when it comes to his function as the center of the covenant and his authorized position as in the interpreter of the words of Baha'u'llah, he's absolutely firm and does not vacillate at all. He demonstrates his authority in that position conferred to him by Baha'u'llah, where he says on the second line, "Whoso deviates from my interpretation is a victim of his own fancy." So this is remarkable, because even though he asserts his servitude, yet when it comes to the covenant, is absolutely firm in his function as the center of the covenant. Just my personal view.
Beautifully said, Riaz John. Excellent. Riaz John, please. You're muted, Riaz John.
Did you all hear me?
Yeah, we heard you, Riaz John. I meant Farzad John. Sorry, Riaz John. I apologize. I apologize. Thank you.
Beautifully said, Riaz John. I totally agree. I would like to just make a comment, just to follow up or to add what Riaz John just said. Not to make excuses for those friends during Abdu'l-Bahā's, right after Baha'u'llah's ascension, but is it possible for the immense respect and love that Baha'u'llah had for Abdu'l-Bahá, that friends were maybe mistaken of the station of Abdu'l-Bahá, how Baha'u'llah addressed Abdu'l-Bahá and how he treated him? That's one point. And the other point, well, the earlier point, that some friends also thought that Abdu'l-Bahā's station was actually above the Bab station, the exalted one, the Bab. Is it, like you mentioned, but I'm pretty sure it's because of the lack of familiarity with Bab's writing. And I think, unfortunately, it's still true to this date because of the lack of translation of the words of the Bab into English. As I've heard somewhere, it's less than 1% of the Bab's, is not exalted on the Bab's writings have been translated into English. And I think only less than 10% are authorized. There's quite a bit that hasn't been indexed or authorized. So I'm just thinking, I mean, obviously they were wrong. Those friends were wrong to think that Abdu'l-Bahá was at the same level as Baha'u'llah. But is it possible that those friends, because of the love that Baha'u'llah had for Abdu'l-Bahá and the respect that he had for him, they thought it's the right thing to put him at the same level? I don't know. I'm just thinking, I don't know. I may be wrong.
It's an interesting question. We'll come to you, dear Yuda. It's an interesting question that you're placing, dear Farzad John. Most of the friends that were in the presence of His Holiness Baha'u'llah distinguished between the stationhood of Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Bahá. Baha'u'llah is on a completely different plane. I mean, if you read the story that I emailed to you, it was, Baha'u'llah is it's so overwhelming a presence that when you enter into his presence, you get lost. You enter into wonderment. Your mind gets blown. Everything becomes emptied, and you just enter into a state of ecstasy. You know, this is what has been recorded in regard to being in the presence of Baha'u'llah, manifestation of God. If you read the accounts of being in the presence of Abdu'l-Bahá, it's being in the presence of an overwhelming love, magnetic personality. It's different. It's not on the same station. It is very different, but it is not like mind-blowing, passing out kind of like awe and wonderment, like, you know, like there was this gentleman passed out and, you know, just completely collapsed, and he was just like, you know, and then he woke up and he was just like, and it's absolute state of serene and happiness and joy. I mean, Abdu'l-Bahā's presence wasn't in that level. I mean, it's hard to talk about stationhood or manifestation. When they're so elevated, it's hard to talk about it. But it's really interesting to, when you read these accounts, to compare that Abdu'l-Bahá was the qualities and attributes that created such a magnetism, such a level of heart attraction between the souls. He had some of those qualities per se, but not on the degree that the manifestations of God have, that would create such a degree of overwhelming, lost in wonderment kind of. Some friends felt that. Some friends felt it. I'm not saying they didn't. And there are accounts that they felt being in the presence. And you can even read Howard Colby Ives' Portals to Freedom as an example. They felt like they were in the presence of God, you know, because Abdu'l-Bahá was at that point in time sign of God on earth. And he's this, you know, representative, you know, incarnation of every Baha'i ideal, perfect exemplar, right? But that's why so many accounts have mistook him as the return of Christ. As you're absolutely right, it's very hard. I mean, when going around and talking about peace everywhere, who is this Bob? You know, no one is talking about blessed Bob. If you look at promulgation of universal peace, I mean, these are all his talks in 239 days, going up and down, you know, United States. How many times did he talk about the blessed Bob, and how many times did he talk about peace or racial unity? You know, so the friends really didn't hear much about the blessed Bob. Go read Abdu'l-Bahá in London. Go read, you know, Paris Talks. Go read. He doesn't really talk about the blessed Bob that much compared to the other, per se, main issues. And this is also another important topic. Abdu'l-Bahá is our perfect exemplar in teaching, okay? So if we automatically start in our presentation of the faith on the history of the cause, that also is not per se the correct approach to teaching. We should have this, look to how Abdu'l-Bahá taught the faith. Look to his talks. His talks were also very on subjects that attracted the heart. They were not very specific subjects. They were talking about peace. How could you oppose talking about peace? How could you talk about talking about disarmament? How can you talk about, so these kind of subjects that Abdu'l-Bahá were speaking were on, and then he would tie it to one element of the faith, bring it all in, and then bring it and tie it to Baha'u'llah. So if you look at his presentation, how does he methodically speak? Then you can map out how you give your, per se, introductions to the faith, your fireside talks. And so this is very, we should look to his example. And then look to also of if 80% of his talks are on the subject of peace and 15% of his talks are on racial unity and then 5% of his talks are on history, we should also have that kind of focus as a Baha'i population on what we are talking about in our presentations, because he is our exemplar. Anyway, that was a tangent, but I wanted you to think about these things in your model of teaching. All right. Miss Yuda had a hand. I missed her. Sorry about that.
Oh, I just wanted to say a lot of the people which gathered around Abdu'l-Bahá in the United States were society women. And those women in general followed spiritual leaders. And I think they wanted to make out of Abdu'l-Bahá a spiritual leader well, that's all I have to say.
You're absolutely right, Miss Yuda. That period of when Abdu'l-Bahá was in United States, there was many movements that were going on, Christian movements, and it was a resurgence that was going on. There was actually there was a movement that was very, per se, liberal, and there was also a movement that was pushing back, trying to be more conservative. And so this type of period, that 1911, 1912 period when Abdu'l-Bahá was traversing the United States, was a very interesting time. And there was many populations, not only on the eastern coast as well as on the western coast, that had these type of ideas where they were expecting either someone holy, whether it was the return of Christ, or they were ready to turn to someone that was of a holy personage. And they were also ready to hear about anyone regarding peace, because they were gone through and they were entering these periods of wars, right? The World War I and World War II, these periods of great conflicts. So there was, so they were ready to hear this message of His Holiness Abdu'l-Bahá, especially someone that per se had suffered, really suffered. So they wanted to hear this person. And if you're a Westerner sitting in New York or in California, with Western attire, 1911, 1912 period, and then someone in the garb, in the clothing attire of Abdu'l-Bahá suddenly emerges on the scene, and you hear this person has been in prison for 40 years in an Ottoman environment, Iran, and suddenly he's coming on this boat and coming to America. You would be interested to hear what he's saying. So and he's talking about peace, what is he? So just the idea of this person coming to our country and talking about peace awoke attention of the masses. So this was, he didn't have to sell himself too much. It was just that what he did and what was an incredible undertaking. All right. Let me make sure I didn't miss a slide. Yes. Okay. Yeah, good. Abdu'l-Bahá also draws on the power of interpretation of the words of Baha'u'llah endowed on him in the Kitab Ahdas and the Kitab Ahd, to emphasize that his interpretation of the statements made about him in the Tablet of the Branch was the correct one, and that no one should deviate from it. This is what Riaz was emphasizing, how he emphasizes categorically, I am the center of the covenant. No vacillation, no room to interpret, right? This is clear. And in paragraph 86, the beloved guardian warns us, this is a very strong warning, that such misinterpretations can cause irrational and superstitious beliefs to creep up into the teachings of the Baha'i faith, as happened in the first century of Christianity. Such beliefs became crystallized into dogmas that have adversely influenced the effectiveness and purpose of the Christian faith. So if you look in the first century of the Christianity, many of these ideologies of who His Holiness Jesus Christ is, the station of God, even misinterpreting that Christ is on the same station as God, the aspect of Trinity, all of the ideologies, and all emerged in the early period of Christianity, because so these are irrational and superstitious beliefs that Christ is God, and then God is man, man is God, and that there are all the ideas, and what is this? And where did this all emerge? And this was in the 1st century, all emerging out of these beliefs that happened in Christianity. And so the beloved Guardian is warning the Baha'is that not to fall into this trap and be very clear. And that's why the beloved Guardian wrote this, the Dispensation of Baha'u'llah, to very categorically outline the fundamental beliefs. Who is the Blessed Bab? Who is Baha'u'llah? Who is Abdu'l-Bahá? And we haven't got to it yet, but what is this administrative order? It's the next part. The Universal House of Justice and the Guardianship. And this is going to be so cool. And also in our one of the parts that coming up, I'm going to show this unfolding divine plan unfolded by the Universal House of Justice. And this latest parts that we're experiencing in this divine plan, namely the Institute process, is part and parcel of this unfoldment of this divine plan coming from the Universal House of Justice. And so this is a very beautiful system. And so we're going to be talking about that. And so in a later part. The early Christian era can be divided into the apostolic and post-apostolic periods. During the apostolic stage, which includes the years following Jesus until the death of the 12 apostles. The apostles led the church. Peter, Paul, and James were the most notable leaders in this period, though Paul's thinking has had the most significant influence. The first Christian church was established in Jerusalem. So this is some history for you, dear friends. The earliest Christian creeds contained in the Gospels and New Testament epistles express belief in the resurrection of Jesus after death. For example, in Corinthians, Paul mentions, "For I delivered to you first of all that which I also received, that Christ died for our sins," right? We hear this all the time. Christ died for our sins according to the scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the 3rd day according to the scriptures, and what he was seen of Caiaphas, then of the 12. After that, he was seen of about 500 brethren at once, of whom the greater part remain unto this present, but some are fallen asleep. This statement and other similar writings in the Christian scriptures reflect the core belief of the Christianity that were formed about a decade after the crucifixion of Jesus, originating within the Jerusalem church. According to such beliefs, Jesus in his physical body rose from the dead 3 days, not 3 days, I apologize, my chubby fingers sometimes miss H's and other things, 3 days after his crucifixion. Hence, the tomb of Jesus was found to be empty by women who came to anoint the body with spices. Jesus appeared a number of times to different people after the resurrection. So this was about a decade after his passing. This became canon, as they say. This became the law, this became accepted, this became what was part of the Gospels, that this is what happened. Abdu'l-Bahá, now all you have to do is just go straight to some answered questions, right? Some answered questions. Abdu'l-Bahá explicitly states, the resurrections of the divine manifestations are not of the body. All their states, their conditions, their acts, the things they have established, their teachings, their expressions, their parables, and their instructions have a spiritual and divine signification and have no connection with material things. Abdu'l-Bahá, His Holiness Abdu'l-Bahá, further explains the meaning of the resurrection of Christ. After the martyrdom of Christ, the apostles were perplexed and dismayed. The reality of Christ, which consists in his teachings, his bounties, his perfections, and his spiritual power, was hidden and concealed for 2 or 3 days after his martyrdom, and had no outward appearance or manifestation. Indeed, it was as though it were entirely lost. For those who truly believed were few in number, and even those few were perplexed and dismayed. The cause of Christ was thus as a lifeless body. After 3 days, the apostles became firm and steadfast, arose to aid the cause of Christ, resolved to promote the divine teachings and practice their Lord's admonitions, and endeavored to serve him. Then did the reality of Christ become resplendent, his grace shine forth, his religion find new life, and his teachings and admonitions become manifest and visible. In other words, the cause of Christ, which was like unto a lifeless body, was quickened to life and surrounded by the grace of the Holy Spirit. This is what resurrection means, right? It was as though his faith was dead after when he passed away. No one turned to him. Look, Peter, the great Peter, denied him 3 times. He didn't have anyone. His followers turned. What did it say? It says right here, he had no resolved to promote his teachings. The cause of Christ was as a lifeless body. So it was as though it were entirely lost after 2 or 3 days. And then what happened? After that, they came, and this Mary Magdalene, right? Mary Magdalene came and went and taught the apostles, went to the apostles, and it is as though the Spirit of Christ was resurrected. The faith re-emerged. And it was now a resurgence, a resurrection of the faith of Christianity. And this is from Abdu'l-Bahá. It says, Christ is ever in the world of existence. He has never disappeared out of it. Rest assured that Christ is present. The spiritual beauty we see around us today is from the breathings of Christ. What a beautiful extract. You should send that to all of your dear Christian friends, That is something that will bring joy to their hearts, and also is attributed by Abdu'l-Bahá, and they will say, who is this Abdu'l-Bahá saying such a lovely thing about, Jesus Christ? And then you could say, it might be a wonderful way to mention Abdu'l-Bahá. But this is a wonderful extract you can share even at the time of Easter. Christ is ever in the world of existence. All right, we're getting too close to our end of our session. We've got a few more slides. In paragraphs 88 through 90, the last few paragraphs now in this section entitled Abdu'l-Bahá, the beloved guardian makes further comparisons between the stations associated with the central figures of the Baha'i faith. He asserts the following major concepts. I'm going to ask my dear, dear friend, Doug, if he could kindly read this one for us.
Identifying the station of Abdu'l-Bahá with that of Baha'u'llah would place Abdu'l-Bahá in a rank higher than that of the Bab. This is against the fundamental verities of the faith. It is more correct and in conformity with the principles of the faith to accept that Baha'u'llah and the Bab are one in their realities. Abdu'l-Bahá is not a manifestation of God and receives his light, his inspiration, and sustenance from Baha'u'llah. As a perfect mirror, Abdu'l-Bahá reflects the glory of Baha'u'llah.
Very well read. Thank you. Just like the manifestation of God is a perfect mirror reflecting the teaching, the will of God to humanity, Abdu'l-Bahá is a perfect mirror reflecting the will of Baha'u'llah to humanity. So he is a creation as such. He says, this is from the beloved Guardian, Abdu'l-Bahá is a perfect mirror. And carrying on, Abdu'l-Bahá does not inherently possess that reality which is exclusive to the manifestations of God. The words of Abdu'l-Bahá are not equal in rank to the utterances of Baha'u'llah, but they have the same validity. Validity means what? Truth, right? So they're equally true, but they do not have the same weight, the same rank, the same station as that of Baha'u'llah. Abdu'l-Bahá cannot be considered as the return of Jesus Christ, the Son who will come in the glory of the Father. Who has that station? What is this? Baha'u'llah, right? And there we are. I think that was my last slide for this section. Let me make a double check, unless it's a video at the very last slide. Nope, that was it. Excellent. Okay. Perfect, dear friends. Riaz John, you have a hand. Wonderful. Please.
Thank you. Thank you. About this last concept of the return of Christ, and who is that? In the slide of paragraph 90, towards the end of that slide, there is a statement that by the Lord of hosts and the coming of Christ is meant Baha'u'llah and the Bab. I bring this up because in the Baha'i community, I feel there is always an ambivalence, whether it's the Bab or is it Baha'u'llah. But in that paragraph 90, Shaykh Effendi, I think the text is explicit. He says it is Baha'u'llah and the Bab in that slide of paragraph 90. So this is a very, and then elsewhere we read today that Shaykh Effendi says it's more correct that the reality of Baha'u'llah and the Bab are the same.
Right.
So this ties, I mean, for most Baha'is, this is a somewhat of an internal fight, especially when explaining who is the return of Christ. Is it the Bab because of similarities, or is it Baha'u'llah, the Lord of hosts? So could we have some clarity? I mean, it's clear in towards the end of paragraph 90.
Great point, dear Riaz John. And we find this is the very bottom of paragraph 90. It's on page 139. If you have your world order, I'll read this because it's a great point that he says, you have written that there is a difference among the believers concerning the second coming of Christ. This is what Riaz John was talking about. Gracious God, time and again this question hath arisen, and its answer hath emanated in a clear and irrefutable statement from the pen of Abdu'l-Bahá. And what is meant in the prophecies by the Lord of hosts and the promised Christ. So Lord of hosts and the promised Christ. is the Blessed Perfection Baha'u'llah, and His Holiness the Exalted One, the Bab. There you go. Lord of hosts, right? And the promised Christ. The reference to the twin manifestations of God. Blessed is Lord of hosts and the promised Christ. And then he goes on, my name is Abdu'l-Bahá, my qualification is Abdul. So then he mentions his own stationhood. But in this paragraph here, he is now emphatically stating in regards to the second coming of Christ. And there's so many other references talking about, when we mentioned some of them, talking about the twin, trumpet blasts, right? And that those are mentioned in the Quran, it's mentioned in the Gospels, and talking about that there is two calls, not just one. And so this is the announcement, talking about that in regards to the second coming of Christ. So here, the beloved guardian wanted to again clarify the misunderstanding of in reference to this. So great point. Any other thoughts? Oh yes, excellent, Doug.
In thinking about how people confuse Abdu'l-Bahá with the return of Christ, I'm quite sympathetic when I think about the context in which Abdu'l-Bahá appeared, and the huge contrast between this wonderful figure and his behavior contrasted with the environment that he showed up in. I'm talking mainly about the believers in the West. That combined with really the lack of much in the way of the writings having been translated, the dearth of translations that were available, is not at all surprising that there would have been considerable confusion about that.
It's a great point. Yeah, thank you so much. Barzajad, you have a hand, please.
I'm sorry, I'm kind of going to repeat myself again, but I think I want to make this point that, again, it goes back to talking about myself as a lack of understanding of the writings of the Bab, because we know the reality of the Bab, like you mentioned, and we just read, and Baha'u'llah is the same. In reality, the station, they're both. But most Baha'is, even today, and I've been a Baha'i for a long time, they consider the Bab, the first thing they consider is the forerunner to the Baha'u'llah, not as an independent manifestation of God, which is his true station. Most Baha'is consider the Bab, the Exalted One, as a forerunner, which kind of seems like it's a lesser station, if you will. So I really think as Baha'is we should, and I know it's difficult with not having that much, works of the Bab in English, but we should really familiarize ourselves with the works of the Bab.
Absolutely. Thank you, dear Farzajah. This was a wish of the Blessed Bab, till the translations of He whom God shall make manifest, is widespread, then his writings is secondary to his Lord will become out. Another, this is what I also heard from Dear Hand of the Cause, Mr. Frutan, when I was serving in the World Center. He mentioned that if the translations of the Blessed Bab were so widely available, many of the friends, if they read them, they would become Babis themselves because they hadn't deepened themselves on the faith themselves. Because remember, this is a manifestation of God. His writings have the same creative spirit, the same power and potency. So we have to imbue ourselves as into the writings. I remembering when I mentioned dear Mr. Frutan, I remember he said the writings are a fragrance. They're a fragrance. and you have to breathe them in. To breathe them in, you have to get up close to them and just inhale them and be close to them and continuously and refresh and fall in love with them. And if you enter into their presence, it creates a transformation within the heart. And this is what is this love affair that you should have towards the writings. And as dear Pastor John said, how does the friends gain that love for the Blessed Bab? What did the beloved guardian do to create that love? One of the first things he did was translate the Dawnbreakers, Nabil's narrative. It's not like the beloved guardian didn't have enough to do, really. Go look how much the beloved guardian was on his plate, as they say. Of all things, he went and go look how thick the Dawnbreakers is. He went, and it's not like it was just a mere translation. The actual document that the beloved guardian translated was the first draft of the Dawnbreakers, and it was not correct, okay? And that from Nabila Azam, when he recorded all those, workings, he had sent it to His Holiness Baha'u'llah. And when Baha'u'llah passed away, that satchel, that all those writings, was the one that was taken by the covenant breakers. And it was in that satchel was the original translation, one that had been edited by Baha'u'llah in regards to the Dawnbreakers. So the beloved guardian had to go on, per se, the unedited version by the original, by Nabil Azam. So he had to go methodically for a whole year, read everything that the Baha'is had written, the history and proofs, all for what? Not only to give us a proper account of the history of the faith, but to give us this appreciation, love, as well as to understand the stationhood of the Blessed Bab in relation to the Baha'i revelation. So this was an incredible undertaking. Riyaz Shah, please, you have a hand.
Thank you. Since we are on the subject of the position of the Bab, as Baha'is in general, sometimes we look for easy ways out in explaining the Bab. Often we compare the Bab to John the Baptist, because there are similarities. However, maybe you can clarify whether this is a good practice or wrong or should or shouldn't. Thank you.
It's a good question, Riaz John. You're correct. That is one of the most common things in a presentation, as a forerunner of John the Baptist was the one to announce the coming of Christ. Another title is used is harbinger, one who is announcing the one to come. The stationhood of the Blessed Bab, he has this dual station of the one who is announcing the coming. John the Baptist has the station of a lesser prophet. He has a station, okay? And he is, and as a lesser prophet, they also announce the coming of the manifestation of God. So they're announcers. So in that sense, it is correct, that he is an announcer as John the Baptist to Jesus Christ. But that is not his only station. And that should be very clear. He has that independent manifestationhood station. He is on the same stationhood as all the manifestations of God. And so this is an incredible station of being a manifestation of God in his own right. So this is something that, when we covered that section of the Blessed Bab in the Dispensation of Baha'u'llah, that we should always be very watchful and careful not to ever belittle the station of the Blessed Bab based upon its brevity, its short ministry, that it is just because it was a short period of time, and that it's a short period. So, the other ministries have a greater importance or anything. The Blessed Bab's ministry is part of the Baha'i faith. It is part of the Baha'i cycle. It started the Baha'i cycle. It's the ministry of the Bab. Every single Baha'i should be so familiar with the Blessed Bab's life, his teachings, and also what the Blessed Bab even taught. So you should read and study. And then, how did the Baha'i faith emerge out of? This is something that we should study. It's all part of your faith. It's like, it's one thing to have in your Baha'i wallet, a Baha'i card and say, I am a Baha'i, but how much do you know of your own history, these parts? Every year we commemorate the martyrdom of the Bab, the declaration of the Bab, but how much do you know of these kind of things? Research, go look it up in your privacy of your chamber and do the homework, as they say. So these are good points. Anyway, dear friends, the hour is late. We're at 8:33. Fantastic discussion tonight. Next week, we're going to enter into a new section in Dispensation of Baha'u'llah. And if you're like, Ehsan, there's another section in Dispensation of Baha'u'llah? And the answer is yes. This part is called the Administrative Order. This is such an awesome part. So, dear friends, if you're joining us for the first time, again, shame on you. Go watch all the videos, okay, and catch up. So then next week, you will all be on the same page. It's going to be awesome. We're going to now be talking about the universal house of justice and the guardianship. It's going to be truly awesome. We're going to be talking about these twin institutions. So wonderful to have you, truly so happy. And let us have a closing prayer. Any one of you, dear friends, thank you so much, as always. And I apologize if I coughed a bit too much tonight. Any one of you, dear friends, just feel free to unmute yourself and share a prayer for us. Thank you.
I will. God grant that the light of unity may envelop the whole earth, and that the seal, the kingdom is God's, may be stamped upon the brow of all its people.
Thank you so much, Samruhi. And that's the seal stamped upon the brow of all its people.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Love you all. Have a wonderful week. Enjoy.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, Marianne.